Let us now go into the Q&A and the questions that have been coming in. But let me also remind viewers and participants also to write their questions in the Q&A chat box and continue to do so. We will take them on as we go along. And also to remind participants also about the Chamber of Commerce poll that is on. It will appear for a few minutes. Just take a few minutes to fill in that poll and respond. I would like to start myself posing a question to Mr. Vish Govindasamy, whom, as you know, is the Group CEO, Managing Director of Sunshine Holdings, very much involved in the dairy and plantation sector. Vish, in terms of the dairy sector, how seriously do you think the dairy supply chains have been disrupted with the pandemic? And have companies had to change or transform their business models to cope and, importantly, grow as
well? Thanks, Rizvi, for that question. I think pandemic made us plan a lot better in terms of the supply chain. See, in the dairy sector, one of the most important things other than the health of the animals is the feed. You have to have enough feed because, on a daily basis, each of these animals need 40 to 50 kilos of food. So when you have a dairy that has, for example, 1,500 animals or so, that's so many tons of feed. So the farms that did not plan and have feed in their farms already, when you had a country that was locked down for almost 2 months, transporting that feed from the various places was a huge challenge. So this gave us a huge wake-up call on, having self-sustained feed in the farm, also making sure you grow your own feed and not being dependent on a supply chain of feed. So these are all new learnings. And if you go to the more developed country farms, you will see huge barns set up of feed kept during the winter. They harvest, the summer they harvest and keep for the winter, etc. Since we are a all-season country, we don't really plan that way for feed. So yes, it was interrupted, but I think Sri Lankans learned quickly and we were able to get the feed system going. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Vish. Whilst the other questions are coming in as well, I have a question for Jayanthi. Jayanthi, to what extent has COVID-19 disrupted the agri input supply chain? I think Sumedha also referred to some disruptions initially with the first wave, because that's very critical. There was also the issue that farmers could initially not get their produce from the farms to the market because of the supply chain disruption. But the agri inputs is very critical. So would you like to comment on what is being done or what can be done to ensure availability of high quality seeds and planting materials, also to support the Saubhagya seed program from the private sector point of view as well?
Yeah, so thank you and good afternoon to all of you. Now, talking of the disruptions during, as soon as the COVID pandemic broke up, it was in March, and because we were going into the Yala season, most companies actually had their planting materials and the agri inputs. For example, when I say planting materials, yes, there was an issue when it came to maize seed, but we must understand that maize in the Yala season is only 10% compared to the 90% that we do in the Maha season. So when immediately when the government did ban the imports, yes, it had an impact. But other than that, the agri input companies were more or less ready for the season. So we must also understand that even if we decide that yes, we are going for a seed program, or we need to give, there is a boost for agriculture and that we need to encourage people to grow, these what we are giving planting materials also come from nature. So that has to be first grown and harvested for others to use it as planting material. So there was a hiccup, but I must also tell that because of the proactiveness of the government to declare agriculture as an essential service, and I'm so grateful to that, despite all the roadblocks, we managed to get the curfew passes, and it was the first time in March, April, May. It was not difficult as we envisaged because we could get to the farmers, and the season actually continued without an interruption, and that is why the results today are testimony to that fantastic private public partnership that we had, where the government encouraged agriculture and the private agri companies stood up and went and distributed the agri inputs. Today, Major General Sumedha Perera will actually certify that today the harvest is 96% of what we expected for the Yala. And this is the best Yala season for the last 3 years. So having said that, yes, we need seed material, and how we look at it is the government actually should be speaking to other successive countries to get the germplasm and then do the R&D part of it so that the private companies can do the multiplication, because we can use the farmers as an outgrow model and go ahead with that. That way, we have the best planting material that will be excellent in adapting to our conditions. In the short term, what the private companies should be doing and what we are doing now, even for maize, we should be getting high yielding varieties, high performance varieties that are suitable for this country. And of course, the government must allow that the trial system to actually quickly happen so that we can bring in those which are excellent to this country.
Thank you. Can I quickly switch to Irfan? This is also within the scope of agriculture, and this is a very important sector, fisheries and aquaculture. And Irfan, I have a question. Irfan, as you know, is the founder and managing director of Oceanpick Private Limited, with a good farm fishing facility in Trinco and taking our products to the world and also to Sri Lanka as well. Irfan, what are the challenges faced by the fisheries sector, that is both wild catch as well as farm fishing, in the COVID-19 period? What are the challenges, and what can be done to increase aquaculture, particularly farmed fishing, where we have at least a global number of 50% farm fishing versus wild catch, so that we have sustainable farming and contribute to environmental things, as well as ensuring local farmers can benefit from farm fishing. So the question is, what can be done to increase aquaculture and farm fishing, including shrimp production as well? And this is what the government also wants to promote. So what are firstly the challenges fish sector in the post-COVID, and what can be done to increase aquaculture and farm fishing?
So thanks, Rizvi. I think COVID-1 obviously took all sectors by surprise. But funnily, the seafood sector in the COVID wave 1 actually continued to do well on the export side of things. That is, again, with the support of the government in terms of movement, etc. I think they managed to continue uninterrupted during COVID-1. What has happened since, though, is there is also an impact on exports based on what's happening in other countries as far as COVID is concerned. So the countries that were strong in COVID-1 are not as strong, I think, in Europe, for example, or the shutdown, because most of the seafood that's supplied out of Sri Lanka goes into primarily the food service sector, not as much into the retail sector. So I think there is a repositioning that's going on right now. But yeah, I think that was a challenge that was unexpected across the board, and I think the wave 1 was good, but wave 2 is posing serious challenges for the seafood sector because of the global shutdown. Number one. Number two, freight, I think, has just gone absolutely through the roof. And that's posing a serious, maybe almost 250 to 300% up. So that's an immediate burning issue that the seafood sector is facing. As far as aquaculture is concerned, we are alarmingly lagging behind. Sri Lanka is lagging behind. The globe is at a 50% aquaculture to wild capture fishery. So that's the only form of protein that's still hunted. Whereas Sri Lanka's contribution, aquaculture contribution to fishery is under 5%. So that's got a vast area for improvement. And I think the areas where the sector can be supported would be a very quick approval process and an efficient investment climate, I think, for the sector to set itself up. Also, I think in addition to that would be the general infrastructure for cold chain management, etc. I think those are the few areas that where as barriers I think we see in terms of growing the sector.
Thank you, Irfan. That was enlightening to know, because this is a sector that can really contribute both from an export point of view and also importantly the nutrition intake, so that we have balanced nutrition with the source of protein, which can come from fish. So thank you, Irfan.
You're welcome.
Prashanth, I have a question. Now, Prashanth is the managing director of Agrithmics, which is an IT company. Prashanth, my question to you is, how can an Agri cloud database be leveraged to support the rapid transformation of the agriculture sector, particularly value-added agriculture? Yeah, how an Agri cloud database, if you want, you can talk about some of your successes that you have practically implemented in, I think, the tea sector, yeah?
Okay, thanks, Rizvi. As General Sumedha Perera mentioned, I think the AIMS, the Agriculture Information Management System, will be definitely a fantastic, a very important step forward, because that will give us a visibility as to who are our farmers, what are they doing, what are they producing, information that was missing currently up to this point. We knew we have close to 1.6 million smallholder farmers in this country, and that's a tentative number. And that's contributing close to 70% of our agriculture production is coming from these farmers. But we did not have the ability to really derive insights from it, to understand who are these farmers and where they are coming from even. So I think this cloud-based data is a fantastic step forward, but we also have to make sure that this database will be up to date on an interactive basis, and there are operational challenges around it. How are the farmers going to prompt when they change from, say, a cabbage farmer is going to change from cabbage to potatoes? We need to be able to capture that information. So there are natural challenges around it. How are we going to do it? Whether it's going to be digitally prompted. But if we are able to capture that with the private sector's support as well, then that will give you valuable information into the supply chains, the supply side. One of the key challenges that farmers face is oversupply situations, where there is a good harvest, but they don't get the right prices in the market because the demand is not matched. So if we can combine the private sector consumer data, for example, the supermarket data, we can we can even take 10, 15 years of consumer movement when it comes to fresh goods, vegetables, perishable goods, etc. And we can fit the right models. We can use AI, data analytics, etc., to predict the future crop requirement, and then use that as a mechanism to guide our farmers and control the farming outputs in the future. So I think the AIMS is a fantastic step forward, and we can definitely see a lot of use out of the data combined with macro data as well as consumer information. I believe we will be able to add great value to the farmers with the right guidance mechanism to protect them from oversupply and wastage situations.
Thank you, Prashanth. Thank you very much. Now we have a whole series, a flood of questions from the audience for our eminent panel, also from the speakers. Major Sumedha, with regard to this issue of unleashing the productivity, you covered it briefly in your presentation as well. The question is again that 30% of the people involved in agriculture accounts for only 8% of the GDP. The sector has many structural problems. What reforms are needed to unleash productivity?
Thank you. Actually, you need a long answer for this, but anyway, I'll try to sum up everything in a short time. Now, you know that till 1977, the agriculture, the share of the agriculture products to GDP is 37%. We were contributing something like 37% in 1977. So in today, you find that it's only 7.5. So I think there are so many reasons attribute to this problem. First thing is that the technology. Still, I think our farmers have not got the proper technology to increase their production and increase their productivity. So that is one of the major areas. Now, if you see even in the department, Ministry of Agriculture, we have Department of Agriculture. Then there are so many research stations. There are a lot of farms, laboratories. All that is there. But quite unfortunately, this technology transfer has not taken place, and it has not gone to the farm and the farmland. So this is something that we are very seriously looking at it. Even the field operatives. Now, at field level, we have so many officers who are involved in agriculture. Even under the Minister of Agriculture, if you take the whole lot, it's about 30,000 officials. It's almost like strength of the farmers in this country. So actually, what we have to do is now to train them and make a connection between our stations, research stations, and these officials, and take these new technologies and the knowledge across to the farmer. Now, as an initiative, I'm going to start a training program for agriculture instructors who are deployed in AGA divisions for 250. Now, they will do a very comprehensive training program. They will go to Mahilupallam and learn all about other food crops. They will go to Batalagoda and learn about paddy cultivation. They will go to Horana and learn about fruits and horticulture, all that. Then Gannoru, technology, then seed propagation, all these subjects. So once it is done, even the agricultural research officers, we have about 9,000 officers deployed. Even they have not been trained properly, so they too will be trained. They will be given, even the new batch of 800 people will be given 8 to 9 months training in farm school. So that is the first step. Then the second thing is the other burning problem is the fertilizer. Now, fertilizer is one of the major setbacks to use modern technology, because as you know that we are using first generation fertilizer, this MOP, urea, and TSP. Now these are not being used by most of the developed countries. These are first generation, but quite unfortunately we are not in a position to use slow released or control release or compound fertilizer because of this subsidy. Now this is something even His Excellency the President is very concerned about it. So we are trying to make some amendments and get the modern or the proper fertilizer to the farmers, and also to improve the production of organic fertilizer. So that is the other aspect. Now, if you take Kegol and Norelia, the potassium level is, I think, above 80% the soil. So this is something that needs to be addressed very soon. Then, of course, the new technology you mentioned, these are the part of the technology. We don't have a proper information system in the ministry. Even we don't have details of our land base. So this AIMS system will provide us with all the land details in Sri Lanka. Cultivable land, arable lands, then the perennial crops, then estates, the paddy lands, all those information will be there. Then as he's mentioned, there will be a trading platform also. Then all the weather patterns will be, also will be depicted there. Then every farmer, his identity, and all the details, the crops that he has grown, including his personal, all the details will be there. Because we are expecting to issue fertilizer from next season, depending on the soil condition. Already we have started distributing 250 soil test kits with the help of some foreign funding agencies. So fertilizer will be distributed as per the soil. So every farmer will have a health card as per that. So these are the major steps. Then of course information we don't get, the production informations, then the market informations, all these things will be included in so these are the few steps that we have taken to improve the technology and see that the farmers use it and increase their productivity.
Thank you, Major. With regard to the structural problem, may I quickly ask Dr. Nafis Mia, from your experience in Asia, South Asia as well, and also your knowledge of Sri Lanka, with regard to the structural problems, how we have this phenomenon of 8%, or now it's 7.4% of GDP taken up by the agriculture sector, although 30% of the people are involved in it. In your experience, I think you covered some of it in your presentation, but do you have a quick response in terms of what Sri Lanka can do to address this structural problem?
Well, so one of the issues, and you see this across a number of countries in South Asia, is that the contribution of agriculture to GDP is declining as countries undergo structural transformation. Nevertheless, a significant proportion of the population remains involved in agriculture, and of course, you only have to do the maths to see that that means that proportionately, agricultural sector is becoming poorer relative to the urban population. So to address that issue, you need to increase the new remuneration to the agriculture sector. It's a matter of simple maths, and that can be done. That can be done through increased value addition, and we've been working in a number of countries about how we might do that. So there might be specific crop combinations, increasing intensity of production, whereas at the same time ensuring that you don't diminish the resource base and ecosystem services. So that's one aspect. The other aspect in terms of structural issues is that across the region, I heard the Honourable Secretary mention about cooperatives and development of cooperatives. Farm sizes are too small, so there's a need for consolidation, for mechanization, and the precision agriculture that we've talked about to be effective. So there needs to be some sort of consolidation of small farm holdings, and that's a structural issue that needs to be addressed, not just in Sri Lanka, but across the region.
Thank you, Nafis. That was very good input, particularly with regard to consolidation of farm holding sizes, the basic economies of scale, and all the benefits that come. So thank you very much for that input. Jayanthi, I'd like to pose this question to you, although the question relates to value-added coconut industry. It can be made generic to cover all value-added agri products as well. And the question is, what plans can be or will be focused to protect or promote exporters of value-added coconuts, so I can add value-added fruits and vegetables, for example, to compete in global markets given the emphasis on agricultural exports. Right now, coconut alone is a 100 billion rupee industry, but global market size is US dollars 35 billion, with tremendous potential not only for food and beverage, but other segments like coconut-based cosmetics, etc. Now, if I can quickly add, I know Jayanthi and I worked together in Hayleys, and we developed a huge value-added fruit and vegetable component. We know that the pineapple value-added market globally is in excess of $5 million, and with all types of value-added, dehydrated, etc. But Sri Lanka, we are at the bottom crawling along. So what can be done to enhance it? I know the question was relating to coconut, but maybe I can generalize it and open for your views on how what we have been doing at Hayleys we can do and replicate it into a growing model across all of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so in general, now if you take whether it's coconut or whether it's another fruit or vegetable, firstly, you have to look at the entire value chain. You can't just look at only one side of it. You have to, from the start to finish. And when you're looking at value addition, we have so many products that actually we can add value and export, but we have to start from the export market. If you look at the export now, how, for example, Hayleys went into tender jackfruit. I'm just taking an example. We saw there was a market for vegan, and in Europe they wanted the replacement for meat to have the same texture of meat. So tender jackfruit was there. It's just not that we went and cultivated tender jackfruit. Yes, the tender jackfruit was available in Sri Lanka. So what we did was, in collaboration with customers overseas, we decided to make recipes, tweaking the flavors so that under their private label, we actually started initially. So one thing we can do is to look at what is exactly available that we can actually export. It is, why would they want to buy from us? We have to be cost competitive. If you look at the regional countries, even if you take India, when we try to export something, what we do, we are not cost compatible. So then in that case, we have to work in niche markets. First, start with a private label, look at what we can actually develop, and make sure that the quality is actually given. But Rizvi, you said about pineapple. Yes, pineapple, invariably our price is high compared to the regional countries like Thailand. So for that, when we look back, we realize that it's the planting material that actually pushes the cost of production. So we have to look at how we can have farmer clusters, guarantee a price, because if you buy pineapple at 65 rupees a kilo, then we cannot even adding value be competitive in the global market. So those are things that we have to look at the entire value chain. And to be successful, we have to start from the market, not try to do something that is there. Like, there are several questions asked, like, tomato is available so much, why don't you make sauces and send? Send where? You can't just take tomato and make sauces or jams and send. So start from the market. But I would like, now that Honorable Secretary is here, the most important thing to make sure that we actually are successful is to ensure that we have a cropping calendar, because we are so blessed with good environment to have a production schedule. But start with the National Food Program, then have a production schedule. I'm sure with smart agriculture, with the assistance of the AIMS that you are going to set up, that is a wonderful program. This is something that we have always been asking, that then we will be actually producing what we want at the right time, rather than going and producing a glut and expecting it to be kept and then blaming that there's no cold storage. You might as well work backwards and find and work the channel through.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayanthi. There's a question here, which interesting one. Why no discussion on the tea industry? Very much related to agriculture, but I have to, I'm afraid, acquiesce to the request from the participant, because we are discussing agriculture. Why no discussion on the tea sector, tea industry, one of the largest foreign exchange earners, also one sector who handled the pandemic well. Wish there's nobody more expert enough than you, so I'll pass it on to you to respond very quickly.
I don't think this is the right forum to discuss about tea, but I think during the first wave, the areas where the tea was grown was not affected. Therefore, the harvest was not stopped, and also the government took a very aggressive stand on not stopping the tea grown areas from harvesting, processing, and also the exports to continue. So I think that made sure that we didn't suffer from a stoppage, because the tea plants can't stop growing. So if you don't harvest, we would have had a huge problem.
Oh.
And during the COVID, as you all know, the tea consumption worldwide has actually increased, because people believe that there is, drinking anything warm or hot helps through the virus. So they have been consuming a lot more tea during this last 7 or 8 months. So the tea market also has done reasonably well. And the weather also during this 7-8 months has been very conducive for good growth. So tea has been reasonably blessed in terms of the growing and also the export, because most of the exports didn't get disturbed. But we do have a problem now after the crisis at the port, and also what Irfan referred to, the freight rates have just gone through the roof. So this is something I think that needs to be addressed, or Sri Lanka will be left behind. So that is an issue.
Thanks, Vish, for those insights onto the tea industry. Prashanth, this question is to you. What are the challenges the tech companies face in digitally transforming the agri supply chain?
Okay. So when you say the agri supply chain digitalization, there are two key aspects. One is the plantation companies. They are in much safer hands because they have digital managers or IT head of ITs who are constantly researching on how they can bring advanced digital technologies to reduce cost of production or increase productivity. Where it's very concerning and the most challenging aspect is the smallhold segment. As I said, close to 1.6 million smallhold farmers, and 80% of them are concentrated around rural areas. And if you take their age groups, the median age groups is in somewhere in the early 50s or mid 50s. So not a very technologically receptive population. So the demography is very difficult for us to take technology to. For example, if we come up with a smart IoT-based, smartphone-based solution for increased productivity, the biggest challenge is taking it to the farmer and getting the farmer to start using it. If you take the younger generation who is more receptive to technology, they are not into farming mainly. They are mostly moving away from farming and looking at other alternative urban job opportunities and livelihood opportunities. Say, despite all that, if we convince both the father and son to use the technology in combination, then comes the next challenge. There is limited network coverage. If you take majority of these areas, very rarely you will find 3G or 4G coverage. So we are unable to provide a mobile application or a smart IoT solution, a cloud-based solution that can be interactive and that can be supportive. The features are quite limited. Beyond all that, then financial capacity also becomes a problem because most of these smallhold farmers are not really willing to invest on this capex. So financial assistance challenge is also there. Due to all these reasons, I think there is not a lot of tech startups in the country compared to if you take the regional markets, if you take the other emerging markets, there are many more exclusively for agri-focused tech startups compared to Sri Lanka. So we have limited focus in that space. And for the same reason, there is limited investments also. So I think it's an overall ecosystem related challenge. I think everyone in the value chain has to start playing their role and understand that when it comes to digitization, Sri Lanka is still at a very, very early stage. If you take India, there are 100 million smallhold farmers, and close to 30% of these farmers are smartphone adaptive. If you take Africa, for example, the mobile money adaptation among smallhold farmers is more than 20%. In Sri Lanka, it's still close to very single-digit numbers. So I think as an ecosystem, every single player has to come together. It's not just the government, it's the private sector, the technology communities, the cooperative societies, the farming communities, the factories. So everyone in the value chain has to really understand and come up with a strategy to have a short-term and mid-term goals when it comes to technology adaptation that can benefit the farmers. So that's one of the key challenges, I think, that we are facing when it comes to digitally transforming this entire sector.
Thank you, Prashanth. The next question, again, I have to go back to Major General Sumedha with regard to the government policy. This question, I think we all know kind of the answer and the approaches you are taking, but for the purposes of completeness of the question, I must pose it to you. It's asked here, getting licenses or approvals to import improved varieties of seeds and cutting of plants have become an increasingly incredible and difficult task. And it takes a long time, which means that by the time the variety is approved, a new variety has come and the farmers are left behind. So there are issues, but still, the question is, can our government improve this?
Yeah, very important question. Now, actually, if you take our agricultural industry, still we produce about 70 to 80% of seed and especially seed and planting materials we import. We produce only about 10 to 20%. So most of the companies and individuals who are involved in importing these seeds and planting materials have faced enormous problems. I know that. One thing is due to the prevailing quarantine acts and regulations. So we are seriously thinking about it, and actually we want to revisit and make amendments to suit the importers and the country's requirement. In fact, today at 2 o'clock, soon after this meeting, I have called the members of the Seed Import Association to have a discussion with quarantine officials and of course the other stakeholders. So I think we will be able to come up with a very good answer. The other aspect is now we never banned seed importation. Actually, we banned maize and other thing for those as a consumer item. Otherwise, seeds government never banned the importation of seed item through other. Of course, there are barriers, so we will see that it's been done. And I know that especially they are facing problems as far as the testing is concerned. Sometimes they have to go through 6 months, 12 years. By the time the tests are over and the seed is approved, a new hybrid variety has come. So these are the problems that we are going to address and get the sector going. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question again for you, Major General, with regard to land. I know this is again a perennial question that we've all grappled with because we have smallholders, small extents of land, but there is a huge amount of land in the hands of the state and state agencies that are underutilized or not utilized in an efficient manner. And we have always tried to engage with government, both on the private sector and through the chamber, to make available this land for potential enterprises, including with very robust, interesting models like the nucleus farm outgrower programs. So even a nucleus farm, you need 50, 100 acres to have a focal point. Then you have 500 or 1,000 smallholders attached to that and make it grow. But increasingly, despite, I know from my experience at Hayleys as well, it took us about 3 presidents and about 20 years, and still we couldn't get that land which I had applied in Mahavali. I was very pleased to see now that the Mahavali is advertising for the land, and I hope that the process will be facilitated and it will be made on a evaluation that's fair and transparent, and also based on the crops. And of course, you can bring in a penalty. If somebody in a year period does not productively use it, you have a right to take it back. But you need the land for at least, I would think in our view, and this is the question that is asked as well, for about 30 years, because you need to develop the land, you need to make investments and all that. So the question is, how will the government provide land for private individuals and corporates for cultivation in an equitable and transparent manner?
Yeah, actually, this is something that was brought to the attention of the government 2-3 months back, and the land issue, because in Sri Lanka, like in Israel and Netherlands and other countries, we have a small land base. So one thing is we need to see that every inch of that land is used properly with high tech and in a more productive manner. But as you said very correctly, most of the land that belongs to these companies like JDB, then State Plantation Corporation, then various government agencies and provincial council, railways, not being used properly. So His Excellency the President, actually he is very concerned about this. Now, if you take, as a good example, if you take JDB, which has about 18 estates, starting from Dharaniyagala right up to Kotagala, and in good locations, about 1,200 feet above the sea level, and where anything can be grown, including all the crops, to say that. But not being utilized. So as a first step, he brought JDB under the control of Minister of Agriculture. So actually we are doing an evaluation now. I think we will be able to get about 6,000 to 7,000 hectares of land from these estates to be given to private sector for precision farming and commercial agriculture. Small plots will not be given because end of the day, if we need to contribute to the GDP, we have to go for commercial and farming and precision farming. That's the story. And also Mahavali, I was the secretary there also about 4 months back. The Rambakang project, there were about, I think, 4,000 to 5,000 acres of land was available for agriculture. There I made a decision with Honorable Minister, of course, Mr. Amal Rajapaksa also was very keen that this should be given for commercial farming, not to give the farmers in small plots, because the problem is they are the dry season. If you give the small holders, they will only do cultivation during Yala. So Maha, if you give it to the private sector, they will invest and see that year-round cultivation is done. So I'm very happy. Even today, the Prashanth Secretary Dharmasena also confirmed that I think they have given about 3,000 to 4,000 acres of land to various companies. So this process has started. And of course, then there are farms that are belongs to NLDB, Milco, and other projects. So we are trying to get all these lands, and with the maximum participation of private sector, even not only lands, even our farms, our tea factories, our dairy industry projects, to have more contribution from private sector and see that these projects become viable and productive. Thank you.
Thank you. Irfan, very quickly to you, with regard to farmed fishing, what are the issues or incentives that need to be given in order to make farm fishing more broad-based in Sri Lanka?
I think, again, going back to some of the other areas where the discussions were based on the approval process. Clarity in terms of what are the zones, where can people go invest into farming, and conflict sometimes with wildlife lands and other maybe sensitive areas. I think maybe that's an area, and I know personally because I've been involved with some of the consultations that the state ministry has engaged us, which is very encouraging, by the way. The ministry has engaged us and given us a plan and asked us to really come forward with what we can do. So I think, Rizvi, in terms of propagating, we just need to make the whole the process of approval very efficient. I think that's one. I think the other thing is other minor housekeeping things like livestock insurance. If there is livestock insurance, there will be more keenness, I think, in livestock farming. Otherwise, the risk that people run is also this thing. Access to finance is particularly difficult in fish farming because of the old shrimp farming saga that Sri Lanka went through. Yeah, so all of the funding agencies kind of run a mile from it. So those are the few challenges, and of course infrastructure in terms of good transport for efficient cold store managed transport will be a key factor also in terms of propagating this whole farming concept.
Thank you. Maybe what we will do now is to do a quick round of questions amongst each of the panelists with regard to how you see the immediate way forward and what your recommendation would be in each of the sectors in order to bring the benefits of what Sri Lanka has to offer with the opportunities coming in post-COVID, so that we get prosperity for all of the stakeholders. So very quickly, Jayanthi, we can start with you in a minute or two.
Yeah, so talking from the private sector, we must definitely think of a sustainable model. The whole idea is not because there is some opportunity and quickly latch on to it, and then eventually the whole chain of people who are involved in it collapses because we cannot sustain it. So what you have specialized in, invest in it and develop the entire value chain. And I only hope that the government policies will not change, because we have been given this assurance by this government that for 5 years it will not change, which is an excellent thing. So we should really go to develop the value chain and also drive in every sector the efficiencies. And I again ask from the government, just like how private sectors look at every activity and challenges it to see and check the KPIs, the government sector also must definitely increase their efficiency, so that even the slightest improvement will bring a big improvement in the industry.
Thank you. Vish?
Yeah, you want me to talk on dairy?
Okay. Overall.
No. So what I wanted to say is that, there's lots of opportunities, and we are planning on being self-sufficient in agriculture, dairy, fishing, etc. While we are doing that, we also need to make sure that whatever we do, we look at the whole, the entire structure. For example, we want to go really ahead in farming, dairy farming, but the back end needs to put right before we try to bring the herd in. That means we need to have enough feed, which means we need to have the lands cleared through the land clearing process and given land to grow, etc. We need to have enough machinery in this country to handle that type of farming. We need to, the secretary, I'm glad he's looking at the quarantine laws, because our quarantine laws are archaic when it especially comes to dairy. So these need to be looked at. We need to be able to bring modern technology, even to get a vaccine today. When there is some kind of a pandemic, there are vaccines for the animals, but we cannot get it in because by the time it comes too late. So these things need to be done. But I think overall, I'm very happy with the approach the government is taking in terms of looking at agriculture forward and to be self-sufficient. All the things are happening, but more stakeholder discussion that will really help. And Honorable Secretary, that would be really, really helpful. And I'm glad what you said this afternoon, you're discussing. It is that kind of discussions that will give you a lot of the insight that the private sector is going through. Thank you.
Thank you. Prashanth, quick 2 minutes on how digitization and IT can support agriculture sector to really transform.
Sure. I think from a digitalization perspective, I think we need to take stock on where we are compared to the regional markets, the other emerging markets. It's definitely very encouraging to see that the Honorable Secretary and His Excellency Presidency, the President also focusing a lot on agriculture and IT. The digital focus is very significant, but we must also understand when it comes to Sri Lanka, when it compared to the regional markets, we are way behind when it comes to digital adaptation at this point. So we need to really leapfrog from where we are. It's not a systematic approach. We need to take a very aggressive approach. And it's every value chain player has to play their role in it. There'll be the telcos, the regulatory bodies, and everyone needs to contribute to make sure that the digital technologies, the benefits from it are reached to the smallholder farmers, to the grassroots levels, as well as to the plantation companies.
Thank you, Prashanth. Irfan, a quick.
Yeah, so essentially, as I was driving, and two things really crossed my mind. I think post-pandemic, new normal, two things that we can focus on. One is fiercely competitive. And being fiercely competitive might mean that we jump a few generations in terms of the technology gap. That's what we did in farming. So we brought the oceanic farm, whereas there were multiple other layers in between where we were and where oceanic farming was. That is one. And I think the second one is fiercely compliant. If we have these two elements in our food production systems across the board, across all of us, and we participate together, these two, I think, will get us through to the next phase post pandemic. This is my quick thought.
Thank you. Dr. Nafis, you have any concluding quick comment with regard to what Sri Lanka can do to take care of all what you presented?
A couple of points. A key word is resilience. What we've seen this year is the COVID pandemic. 3 years ago, there was the droughts and floods, and they will happen again. So the agriculture sector has to be resilient, able to take these shocks. So one of the things that needs to be done is the R&D capacity building, the extension service capacity building, because without that, it'll be very, very difficult. I just want to make one point because I think it might be missed here. Because it's in Sri Lanka, we're talking about smallholder farmers. For many of them, return on investment is going to be very, very low. So when we talk about mechanization, we talk about the application of ICT, etc. They just can't see where the benefit is in terms of return on investment. So that issue has to be addressed. And it may be that for many people, because we're talking about sustainability in all its dimensions, environmental services and ecosystem services, in many countries, farmers are paid for delivering ecosystem services. And that's something that Sri Lanka, given where it is at in terms of its development, needs to consider. It may not be possible that these smallholder farmers will ever be economically viable in the classical sense, market driven, etc. but they have an important role to play in keeping the ecosystem services.
Thank you, Dr. Nafis Mia. And Major General Sumedha, you will have the last word in terms of very quickly, the minute what government will do and can do to help support whole of agriculture to really transform.
Yeah, quickly, if you go through, so the first thing area that we are looking forward is to digitalize and to have a proper system, information system in place. Then the other thing is to take agriculture to the farmlands and the farmers. So in order to do that, we are in the process of organizing all the agrarian centers in the village level and to train our people and take them, use them to take modern technology, the farmers. Then, of course, our agriculture research stations and farms. So we have allocated more than 1,500 million in this budget to increase the capacity of them, then seed propagation, then research, then produce hybrid seeds and all kind of technological activities. So they will be upgraded very soon, all those 5 major research stations. Then, of course, the quarantine laws and Seed Act, Quarantine Act, all these things will be revisited and will make amendments to in a way that it becomes user friendly. So these are then of course the other things like we are more concerned about the post-harvest losses. About 30 to 35% of our products are being lost whilst transporting. So that is one of the areas. And like for tea and rubber and other perennial crops, we don't have proper branding system, no proper food processing system. So value addition is not there, especially for export agriculture product like spices. So this is also one of the areas that we are seriously looking at.
Thank you very much. That was very enlightening, very comforting, and I'm sure will contribute a lot to agriculture development transformation in Sri Lanka. We've come to the end of a very interesting session. I must thank our speakers as well as the panelists and also the audience. I must say, I hope not too many of you are disappointed. We couldn't cover the whole plethora of questions that came. It was too much. We couldn't cover it in the 60 minutes. So I recommend to the chamber that these questions that you had will be addressed in some way, and we will definitely include it in an addressal with government and the relevant authorities to take up these many issues that came in as questions which could not all be taken and handled. Thank you very much. Over to you, Savitri.